Hi, I'm Claude Sharadi, and thank you very much for watching this video. Melbourne's African communities continue to experience the issue of troubled youth. We still see every couple of weeks or so reports of young Africans involved in some antisocial or criminal behaviors. We have to acknowledge that there are some issues and they need to be addressed. So here at AMA, we decided that we need to invest a little bit of time to try to find out really what is happening. Where are the gaps? Also, what is the government really doing in relation to this issue? Are they really doing the right thing? Not just the government, the communities. Do they really know what is going on? What we thought we would do is we start with a series of interviews to find out who is doing what in relation to this issue, starting with those service providers who specialize in providing services to young people. And today we have had a chance to interview Kamo Guerra, who's the CEO of CMY, which is Center for Multicultural Youth. They've got quite a bit of experience in working with multicultural youth. So we thought we would start with them and see what they are doing, what is working, what is not working, where are the gaps, and what's the best way to address them. Kamo Guerra, we'll be talking today about some of your work with African youth. First, for those who may not know CMY within the communities, can you please tell us what CMY is and what it does in general?
Yeah, CMY is a statewide community organisation. We've been around for nearly 30 years, and our work has been to help young people and their families rebuild their lives in Australia. So we focus on all young people of refugee and migrant backgrounds.
All right. Can you tell us what exactly you do with African youth, or what sort of programs you have with them?
Yeah, we have had contact with African Australians or young people of African backgrounds for many years now, for over 10 years particularly. We've had lots of young people come in through our programs. Mm-hmm. They've come in through our counselling services. We do counselling work and group work with families. Mm-hmm. We've also done sports programs. We've worked with young people who attend homework clubs and schools. And then we've also done a lot of work with young people in building their sort of capacity and strength as leaders. Mm-hmm. to contribute to the Australian community. So we work with them really across a range of different areas.
And I suppose over the years the nature of your work has changed. More recently there's been a lot of focus with youth at risk and, yep. and those some of them offending. How are you dealing with that at the moment?
I have close to 10% of my workforce are people from African backgrounds, not just South Sudanese who are in the media at the moment, but African. Mm-hmm. So I talk to them a lot, and they talk to me about what it's like to be a person of African background living in Australia. Mm-hmm. The young people we have talk to me a lot about how things have changed for the community, that 4 or 5 years ago they felt safe walking the streets, that mm-hmm. they thought that the level of open prejudice or racism wasn't there. I think that's changing. So a lot of our work most recently has been to help the young people and their families work on how to find a way to live in the community in a safe way and help the Australian community, the non-African Australian community, understand what it's like to be an African young person in Australia.
And what proportion or percentage of your work is focusing at youth at risk as opposed to just youth in general?
Yeah, look, at different levels. I personally, in my role here, I also sit on the Youth Parole Board, which means that I get exposure and oversight of a lot of the young people of African background who are troubled, mm-hmm. who are in detention. At that level, I have, a lot of knowledge about what goes on. So over the last 6 to 12 months, we've been working with members of the South Sudanese community particularly, mm-hmm. and wanting to help young people and mentors go into the youth justice system to help set up programs that help them come to terms with their culture, their families and communities, so that they maybe feel greater strength. So mm-hmm. we do work in that area. We do also work in the crime prevention area in Wyndham, where we work with other agencies locally there to work with those young people. So we do a lot of that kind of work. Mm-hmm. And then we also do a lot of work supporting different African groups, young people's groups who are setting themselves up to do activities.
All right. Out of the programs you've mentioned that you're doing with African Australian youth, which one you think is sort of the most successful one?
Oh, that's a hard question to answer. I think I try and measure success by young people who come into our organisation are more confident and able to find a pathway in the community. So in some ways, all of our programs do that in different ways. So I'm not sure how we measure that success, except I think we are good at young people telling other young people what we do. So that's a success for me when they refer other young people to come to us for support and assistance in doing things.
And what are some of the ingredients of that success in that specific program that you've mentioned? What is it creating that success?
I think the successes are many. I think the first one is that you have to listen very carefully. You need to listen to the community, to the families and to the young people. And by listening, I mean hearing what they're saying they really need as opposed to what we think they need. And then once you do that listening, the next bit is to work with them in partnership. You work together to try and develop what that is. And then you also support them to do things themselves, but not let them go completely, but try and support them right through the way. And then I think the greatest success is to see the community and young people doing things themselves with our support and feeling connected to the rest of the community.
Now, you obviously there's quite a lot of things that are being done with African youth at this point. It looks like it's not quite working.
Yeah.
Is that a fair assessment?
Look, I think it's a really good question. My feeling is at the moment there is a lot of goodwill. There is a commitment from government to invest. The community is wanting to help, but I think that maybe it's not coordinated enough and we're not working together enough. Because my many years of experience with different communities has also taught me that you can't expect the community that is having struggles or challenges with their young people to expect to solve those on their own. They have to be part of the solution, but they have to work together. And I think that's what we have to do.
Are you actively engaging and collaborating with African communities in addressing these youth issues? If so, what exactly are you doing?
Yeah, so at the moment we've been fortunate enough to have got some money from the state government for developing what's called community support groups for the South Sudanese community in the Dandenong area, Dandenong Casey, and in Bring Back Melton. So that project will be done in partnership with the South Sudanese community. So we have some established relationships with the peak bodies, but we also know what we need to do is to speak to all the community leaders and elders from the sub-communities, from the church groups. We want to speak to the mothers, we want to speak to the community groups. So, you know, we are starting to make contact with all those groups in those other areas because we know they know best what is needed to help the community. That our role is to be the support. So we will employ the workers. We're going to employ a whole lot of South Sudanese staff to run the project, and then we will be behind them, supporting them to engage with the community and young people to co-design programs and things, activities that they think will help the community.
What seems to be happening, and it's been happening for quite a while, is that the government would provide some money, and agencies such as yours or others will be provided the money to say work with African communities or engage African communities. That agency will hire 1, 2 or more Africans, and that person would try to engage with the broader group. But you kind of have the impression that it sort of stops there. It's no really deep, more very meaningful type of engagement. Yeah. Is that too cynical?
Look, I think it is, and I think because our sector as a non-government sector and community groups have not done this work very well. So the relationships I've been trying to build over the last 2 years, I've got a lot of that comments and cynicism about why is CMY different, because they've seen many groups come and go and do that. So I think the communities, the elders, the associations, rightly so, have a degree of scepticism. And all I can say to them is that you need to work with us and watch us, and that what we do is how I'd like you to judge us. I think that all I'm saying to them is you need to work with us and trust us and go with our reputation of what we've done in the past, acknowledging that you're right, there is a lot of cynicism, because I think a lot of organisations have historically got significant government funding to deliver programs for the African community, not with the African community. Because my other danger is, I think the other danger that I'm very mindful of, because I've worked with many different communities, and say when I worked with the Vietnamese community in the 1990s, I think that the danger there was too, and we've learnt this, that you want to give money to the community to run all these programs, but often they don't have the staff, the knowledge, the skills to run them straight away. So therefore many of those groups failed. So government took money away from them and never gave it back. And it's only now, 25, 30 years later, that you see that there's these wonderful Vietnamese community associations running programs. I don't want the same thing to happen to the African community, where you give them money to do things assuming that they're going to meet all the government criteria. That I think it's a partnership where we work together, and that our role is to mentor, to show how, so that maybe in 3 years' time the community will be able to run these programs themselves, knowing that CMY will be behind there to help them, but not to actually control them.
But then what usually happens, obviously there are things that I don't know, but what from a community perspective, what seems to be happening a lot is, even when an agency such as yours would engage with leaders, it's more on, it's not really on the management of the program as such.
It's not equal.
Equal type of thing. Do you agree with that? And do you think there's room to make improvement in that?
I think we have to make improvements, because otherwise all we're doing is the same, and we don't want to do that. You know, I have lots of young people we work with who have got some skills that need to be put into practice for them to take on some of these roles.
What do you think is the gap between what is being done now and what should be done in order to best address these sort of issues?
Yeah, look, I think we have, from all the young people we work with, whether it's those that are doing quite well, that are educated, to those who are really struggling through crime, a lot of them are not feeling welcomed in this country. A lot of them don't feel like there is hope and opportunity for them. And that troubles me deeply, because I've worked with young people, you know, for over 30 years, and I've always found that that's the reason I do this job. I come to work every day and I interface with young people who have got hope and optimism. They want to change the world. Well, I'm now coming across some of these African young people that don't have that anymore. So for me, I think there's something not quite right going on. What is happening here, that these young people's aspirations and hopes are not like those before us. So something has to change, that we need to see young people in jobs. We need to see these young people with qualifications and degrees getting a job, so that when you go into a shop or a bank or a government department or whatever, there are people behind the counter who look like you. I hear that all the time from young people. We need to support the families. I don't know whether we've actually done enough to support the mothers. And I think the other thing is too, we need to do some work with the general community, mainstream Australian community, in breaking down some of this fear that some Australians have of people of African Australian background, because of this very small but very visible group of young people.
Which I suppose brings us to an issue that I think is also quite important, which is about communication. When I look at what is happening, and there are two levels of it, first in terms of the African community, when you look at in the broader society, when the government wants to change people's behaviors and things, they engage in some sort of mass communication campaign, because this is things that, you know, education through mass media and all that sort of thing. Even though these youth issues has been happening for quite a while, I'm in the media sector. I don't see nobody comes to me or anyone else in the African community say, okay, we want to communicate more broadly with the African community. Tell us what we need to do. How do we produce communication? Because many of these young people are always online. In fact, most of the things they do, they communicate first online. But you don't see anyone, whether from the government or the agencies or anybody, putting some communication out there in a very regular and consistent way to try to educate and hopefully change behavior from this. Why is that not happening?
Yeah, I don't look. That's a good question. I don't quite know the answer to that as well, because I think communication is key, and that we need to communicate with the families and the young people, and we should be using the community itself to make that communication as well as other forms. So that surprises me.
Yeah, because obviously you can engage with community groups, and there's only a certain amount of people that you can actually reach.
Yeah.
But if you add mass media or online media communication, then you're broadening your reach, because you're never going to be able to reach out everyone in.
I suspect that it could be one of those things where people haven't thought through enough to realise that there are lots of people like yourself. There are there's lots of people of African background, Australian Africans, who are doing lots of stuff in the media, and I think they're an untapped resource. That's, I would agree with you totally, that why aren't we using the people who communicate with
the community,
and also particularly because at a state government level, they are doing good things to help the community, that they should be spreading that message
exactly
out. So it could just be something that they haven't actually considered themselves.